September is Suicide Awareness Month, and I wanted to have someone on the show that really has made an impact on how we view and treat suicide. Elyce Mandrich is a therapist, a mom, and has her own experience of losing her mom to suicide. We talk about the challenges of the aftermath and how it inspired her to become a therapist. Elyce's ability to humanize conversations around suicide is a gift that she shares with us today. If you're new here, you're listening to the How We Get Thru podcast, a place for you to feel connected through deep and meaningful conversations with healers from all over the world. I'm your host, Jen, a licensed therapist and founder and CEO of the How We Get Thru app, and my mission is to bring you affordable and diverse therapy resources to help you get through the hard stuff, all in one place and at your own pace. Welcome to the How We Get Thru community. Hello and welcome back to the How We Get Thru podcast. We have Elyce Mandrich on the show today. You guys, Elyce is a therapist, but also a fellow podcaster. Back in the day when it was, I feel like it's really popular now. Like anyone, you were like OG.
I don't think I was OG by any means, but it was like a hot minute, short-lived, fun thing to do.
Yeah. What was yours on?
We did all mental health stuff. So it was like another therapist friend and I.
Yeah.
But
That's
another
fun.
therapist friend and I are talking about starting one. So we might have to jump in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
That's
see.
the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's so good to connect. I just hit you up on Instagram and we connected
I feel
through
like
there.
we were meant to be just in general. We just
You can vibe it.
Yeah. See?
Exactly.
That's it for the podcast, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. But in reality, I know that you have a huge story to tell about suicide, and you're very big about talking about suicide. Suicide's not a bad word.
Yes.
Did you coin that yet? Did you trademark that?
No, I should. But
Yeah.
that's my jam. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And September is Suicide Awareness Month.
Yes, it is.
And so it's let's get her on.
Yes.
Let's
do it.
connect.
Yep. Let's
Yeah.
talk all the things.
Okay. So I'd love to know more about your story, but I'm also curious if your path to becoming a therapist was inspired,
Yeah.
by your trauma.
Yes. Hey. What therapist doesn't have a good story, you know?
I know.
I always tell people, and if you are listening and you're not a therapist, you can look this study up, but the adverse childhood experiences looks at early child abuse and neglect, right? And I'm always I don't think I've ever met a therapist that doesn't have an ACEs score.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
yeah, bring on the trauma.
There it is. And we learn to heal ourselves in that journey of wanting to become a therapist and heal others. And you were in schools for a long time, a therapist or social worker in schools.
Yeah. So I did CPS for a while, and then I did
Oh,
school
wow.
social work for 5 years.
Wow. And now you're private practice.
And now private practice.
Do you love it?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
That's different, huh?
It's different and harder in ways. And I don't even want to say different or harder or easier. I think it's just different. It's harder in some ways, easier in others. But I think I just really like to just be my own boss. And then when I'm mad at someone, I can only be mad at myself.
Yeah.
I'm well, you didn't do your notes. So
Exactly.
that's on you.
And you can never work for someone else again. That's how I feel. I'm
No,
I could never do that.
I can't. No.
Yeah.
No. I know.
Love it.
I think it's great.
Okay, girlfriends. So you talked about your mom committing suicide when you were younger, but can you tell us about what was it like growing up for you before things happened?
Oh, that's a good way of asking it. Normally people just go straight into it and then the after. Yeah. So I was 10 years old when my mom died by suicide. It is a really interesting thing because prior to that, I hear stories about my mom and just things of pieces of her that I'm that's not the version I knew. So I think a lot of people that truly knew my mom, I think there was a lot of challenges and things that people knew about her. But that's not the version I saw. So my mom had us really young, me and my older brother. So she was 31 when she died. So had me at 21, 22.
Wow.
Just honestly a great mom. Lunch notes in my lunchbox. I still can remember the way she drew her hearts. So cute. But really loved the shit out of her kids. She, I think at the time was going to school to do something in the medical field. She's doing, I think, like kind of like a trade school type thing, but for the most part growing up, she was like stay-at-home mom, just like really into us. Yeah, a lot of love. So it obviously was very surprising when this happened, at least to me, because I didn't see like what was going on for her. And enter like little side note, I within the last few years connected with somebody that reached out to me who lost her mom to suicide kind of around the same age. Not at the same time, this girl's a little bit older than I, but we talked about our experiences and it was so different. Like her mom, she just had mentioned, you know, a lot more obvious signs of like a struggle, and that in and of itself was challenging, where for me, it had its own challenges because I didn't see that side. But it was like truly out of left field in my perspective, like even looking back. But what we learned later, my mom had experienced a ton of trauma as a kid, really struggled, like I think in her teen years, just in general with like her mental health and, you know, probably undiagnosed depression there. And then there's some talk that maybe she was struggling with like postpartum depression. At the time, my youngest sibling was like, see, she died in June. His birthday's in August. So 10 months old.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. And
so you have an older brother and then you then a middle or then a younger?
So I'm big blended, but from my mom, I have older brother, same mom, same dad. Mom and stepdad, I have 2 younger brothers. And then you enter this side of it, dad and stepmom, and I have more siblings over here.
Yeah. Okay.
So yes, my mom had a total of like 4 kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were part of the first, when did your parents get divorced?
I think when I was a baby.
Okay.
So I think my stepdad came into my life when I was like 9, 10 months old.
So then she had 2 kids with your stepdad. Do you know if it was undiagnosed postpartum?
For sure. And this is, again, I hear like bits and pieces. I think that like their first son, I think she had struggled with some like postpartum. I think there was like either she was seeing a therapist or like talks of her going to see a therapist or psychiatrist. Like there was mention of that. So I think there was some knowledge that she was struggling, but she had struggled with the other baby when he was born prior and like got through it. So my understanding is like it was kind of like, this is, you know,
normal.
This is a normal experience after having a baby and baby blues, whatever you want to call it, and she's going to get through it. So that was kind of more like hindsight of information I learned later.
And how far apart are they? Your younger siblings?
They're 3 years.
Okay.
So we're all 3. It's like older brother, 3, me, 3, and then the next one 3. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, 7. Sorry.
That's okay.
This trauma.
Yeah.
No, my 2 youngest are 7 years apart.
Okay.
Or 6, something like that.
Have you talked to your older brother about this and what his thoughts were, what happened? So he was 13?
He was 13 when it happened. Yeah. Yeah, he recalls like instances of her like crying spells almost, or just like seeming sad, but still kind of the same. I don't think it was like ever anticipated. And his experience is very different. He unfortunately is like the one that found her, and had, you know, he definitely is taken a lot of the hit with like the impact of that this has had on like his life. Again, it's like bits and pieces of nothing that I think would be like, oh, this makes sense. We saw this coming, you know? And then just like little details. And I don't like to talk about the method just in things like this, just because of, I think, in how we talk about suicide, you know?
Yeah.
But there was a couple things later that kind of indicated the way it was like planned. But again, it was like learned later after the fact.
And how is your relationship with your stepdad? So then did he just take care of all 4 of you? Did he remarry?
So yeah, it's funny, the timeline of things. I think this was like the summer before I went into 5th grade. This is where it's so spotty. I think I finished 5th grade at like the school I was at. I stayed living with my stepdad at the time. And then at some point, my older brother and I moved in with my dad and my stepmom. It was kind of like, you know, this happened essentially, I think like my dad felt like a responsibility of like stepping in, and because at that point we were going over there like every other weekend and like on Wednesdays or something like that. My stepdad, I think, like took it really hard. I think obviously it was really hard. He's in general not somebody that really is very like, it's interesting. He's very emotional and like sensitive in ways, but he's also not one to like really talk about this. I still think it's in general hard for him to talk about. He did remarry a couple years later, And the person he married also has an experience of losing someone to suicide.
Wow.
That's very close to her, so it really connected them. So she, essentially was my two younger brothers, like, mom growing up. Like, that's who they call her mom. She's been amazing in the family. And I have a good relationship with both of them. I think there's always this kind of, like, not elephant in the room, but I think just this, like, loss was, like, so big that I'm kind of like that. I'll talk about it and all day long, and that's not everyone in my family. And so I think the relationships have just kind of, like, adapted, but we're all still, I would say, like, fairly close. And my older brother and I are actually, like, planning a trip to go visit my two younger brothers. They live in Texas. So we're planning, like, a sibling trip. And, we really vibe off, like, dark humor. So we send each other some interesting texts on, like, Mother's Day and things. So it's just, like, how we cope, and not to, like, make light of it, but to just, like, this is just the reality of it, And it's just kind of, like, how we all vibe.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, just looking from a family perspective or family systems perspective, but also just personality and developmental, like, it all will impact you differently.
Yes, 100%.
Because of all those aspects.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I always think about that. My, like, baby brother, I'm like, at the time, who was literally an infant, I'm like, he doesn't remember her. But I always wonder, I'm like, man, how much of that impacted him in ways that, like, we don't have a before and after to really compare to because he was a baby. But you think about developmentally and trust versus mistrust, right? Like, all these things of, like, what a baby needs, and, like, losing that. Same thing, my, 7, 10, 13, like, it's just so different. And it is one of those things, like, I'll speak just from my perspective, like, it hits at different times, right? Like, it's truly like that grief button. Most days I'm okay. I can talk about it most of the time and I'm okay. Most anniversaries and birthdays, like, it's expected, it comes, and it's, I think about her and I celebrate her in different ways. But it's like those little moments where, I was having a baby or I was getting married and I'm like, man, this sucks that she's not here. Like, this would have been, really nice.
Yeah. And just allowing yourself to feel that when it comes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that happens with mom, and then you are now living with dad, and dad has new children already.
So at this point, they have when I move in, how old was my little sister? 3, I want to say. And then my stepmom was pregnant and due. So, like, they pretty much went from 1 kid and 2 every other weekend to 4 full time. Yeah.
Wow.
And, like, a preteen, like, and then my older brother, and, like, we were going through it in different ways. Like, my middle school years, first of all, my stepmom and I, like, that I call her my bonus mom, like, an angel of a human. She truly treats my older brother and I like we are hers. And they were just figuring it out too, So but she always talks about, she's like, man, your middle school years were interesting, because I was writing, like, dark poems. Like, if you were to read these poems as a therapist now, you'd be like, we need to do a risk assessment on her immediately. And like, I wasn't suicidal, but I wrote about suicide, like, dark.
I love that.
And it was totally just my way of, like, coping through it. But I'm sure my English teacher was like, had my parents on speed dial to be like, let's just keep an eye on her,
Yeah.
But it was, like, totally my way of coping through it. And I wish I could pull them out, but I got, like, a couple poems published that were, like, about my mom, which was so sweet. And I'm sure everyone that submitted a poem got accepted and had to buy the $80 book, but it was so cool.
So writing was a big thing for you.
Yeah, at the time. Yeah. Big time. And I don't think I realized it, but now, of course, like, reflecting back, I think that was, like, my like, journaling,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like for you to lose your mom and then have a new home, new everything?
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
Really hard. I didn't realize this. I learned this, like, a few years ago, I think. But my dad, there was, like, this letter I wrote to my dad that was basically like, thank you so much for, like, saying that we could come move in with you, but, like, no, thank you. I want to stay. And my dad was kind of like, so sorry, but, like, you're coming to live with us. So I didn't really have, like, quote unquote, much of a say in it. And I truly, it's so hard, right? I don't know what my life would have been like had I stayed. I would have been great. Like, I had a great relationship with my stepdad, his new wife, who I consider, like, a stepmom. Again, she's amazing. My little brothers. But it was a huge switch. Like, even the way the houses were run, like, looked very different. The
Yeah.
expectations were different. And again, not anybody was better or worse. It was just different.
Yeah.
And truly, like, my brothers, especially the baby, like, at the time that I, like,
Was it sad to leave him?
I wasn't like his mom, okay, I know, but like I definitely took on this like motherly, like, I loved to just like spend time with him, and like I loved in general like playing with baby dolls. So that was like my baby. So I think that was like the hardest part, like not seeing my stepdad all the time. Like I grew up with him since I was a baby.
Yeah.
I called him dad my whole life. My brothers, but my parents, I feel like, and when I say my parents, my dad and my stepmom, I think did a really good job of nurturing those relationships and allowing us to, like, we, as far as I know, went over there whenever we wanted. Like,
Yeah.
everybody co-parented really well. So they did a good job of making sure there was that support, but we lived, you know, still a good 45 minutes, hour away. Changed schools. That was really difficult, and just like developing new friendships and all of that in like a new city. But this was really sweet. But my dad, when he turned 45, again, my parents are young. When he turned 45, I did like one of those little projects where I had 45 people write him like a letter.
Aww.
And my dad is like, just, you know, like the saying like WWJD, like what would Jesus do? We like literally say, what would Randy do? Like he's totally one of those people to a lot of people. And my little brother at the time, the one like underneath me from my mom and stepdad, he wrote something short and sweet. He was like pretty young. I think he was either in high school still or like going into the Navy, like baby boy. But he wrote something very simple that was just like recognizing how my dad tried to make sure those relationships were still continued. And it was like the sweetest thing.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
I feel
and
so
again,
teary.
while hard, like not silver lining it, but I'm also, the way things turned out, I'm grateful. I feel like I got to develop stronger relationships with my dad and my stepmom, who I knew obviously they were my parents, but you know, going to someone's house every other weekend and on Wednesdays is very different than like living with them. And I think that they were a big motivator for me to go to college. And again, I can't compare because I don't know what that would have been like, but very motivating and encouraging. And I like went into freshman year of high school taking honors classes and had to repeat them because I failed. Like I was not a straight A student. I was very average. So I think like their encouragement really helped me to feel like, oh yeah, like I can do that. Like, what do I want to do with my life? So that was always really special too.
I am a divorced kid as well. And so when you talk about writing that letter, it does feel like the kid sometimes has the power. Like, I don't want to go over there this weekend.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. And so I had to like laugh about that. It's like, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
Because there is like, especially when I think custody is split like that, your home with mom is your home.
Yes.
And then I'm just
especially
visiting.
in the 90s, like that was yes, that was
very normal. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So to have again shift all the things, new school, new family, and then to be away from your baby.
Yes. And in that same breath, developed like new relationships with my siblings over here. And my saving grace, quote unquote, through all of that is like my older brother and I like stuck together. Like that was my, and that's what's kind of cool about, so there's, I'm technically, I say one of 8. Okay. So it's older brother and I, 2 from this family, 2 from this family. And then when my stepdad remarried, she had 2 kids coming in.
Okay.
So what's funny is there's pairs for all of us. And like my 2 brothers over here, very close. My 2 siblings over here are close. My older brother and I are close. And then the 2. And we all have like relationships with each other, but we each have like that one sibling that's like our, you know, we're like
your ride or die.
My ride or die. And that's, so my older brother and I think getting to do that together was like a helpful piece because you weren't in it alone. It was like, we're doing this together.
And he was going into high school when this was happening?
He was,
like 14?
8th grade. I think the same thing. I think he maybe finished out 8th grade. Yeah. And then started in high school and we moved in with my dad and stepmom.
Did either of you like party hard, go crazy?
My older brother, no, he was very much like, he's very much more on the introverted side, quiet. I mean, literally the opposite of me. We are opposites, like in band, like, and I was like, I partied a lot in high school, had a lot of fun. definitely the social butterfly, like tested all the limits and things.
Yeah.
And then I got to college and I'm like, I don't need to do any of that because I felt like I was like, I'd already lived that life, you know? So I got to college and I was much more like, okay, no, like I'm just ready to like focus on school. And I still did some stuff, but I wasn't into like Greek life. I didn't really like party a lot. I kind of just hung out. I worked in restaurants. So, you know, you go and hang out afterwards, but that was like the extent of my craziness.
What restaurants did you work in?
I worked at like a piano bar. I worked for Sizzler. I worked at Red Robin.
Yes.
Red Robin was like my college.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then did you immediately go into master's? Did you know you wanted to be in social work?
So funny enough, I like my senior year of high school, we had like a senior project. We had to shadow somebody. So we have a family friend who's in LMFT and did a lot of like play therapy. Like she had like a sand tray. She had an in-person office and I shadowed her and did my project on her and remember thinking it was like fascinating. I knew to some regards I wanted to go to college for like psychology, right? That's like all anyone thinks of when you want to go in a field like this. So my undergrad initially was like psychology, and then I got into undergrad and was like, change it to human development with a minor in psychology because psychology was very like research based and human development was more like the theories. And I want to say I don't know if it was my junior or senior year, but somebody from CPS came in to talk to one of our classes and were like telling a horrific story. And I was like so intrigued, like that's what I want to do. So I like reached out, tried to figure out how to get them to let me as an undergrad student like volunteer because it wasn't like a formal internship and the school wasn't setting it up. So I'm like, how do I do this? But weaseled my way in, got an internship or volunteership, whatever you want to call it, as an undergrad. That's where I learned about social work. And there's like in California, and I think in other states too, but like this program that basically paid for graduate school. And then you just worked for the county to like pay back your time for a couple years. And I was like, well, that's sweet. So how do I do that? So that's initially like what got me into social work. I didn't even know, this is so embarrassing. I had no clue that social work could be clinical or like therapy. Until I was like sitting in a class and I'm such a dumbass, but I like raised my hand. I'm like, is this like therapy? And she was like, yes. And I'm like, I just came to work for CPS, you know, like I had no idea at the time. But obviously as time went on, like I think that interest kind of continued to grow. And then you enter in like the mom stuff and the high school experience. And I think it just like all came together.
Yeah.
But I always say like in so many ways, social work found me because like I thought CPS was going to be my end all be all. Learned very quickly after a few years of working there, like absolutely not. This is great experience, but not sustainable for me. Went back to school to get my credential to do school social work. And then same thing. Not that it wasn't for me. I think COVID and connecting with so many therapists on Instagram and stuff was like, dang, all these like women like me are owning their own business and doing this thing. Like maybe I could do that. And then eventually I was like, yeah, no, let's do that. So it's just all kind of like unfolded.
Yeah. And it will continue to unfold. Which is exciting.
Yeah.
Was CPS involved when your mom died by suicide?
No, I think, and this is just going off my experience of working for CPS, had it been an attempt where she survived, they would have gotten involved, is my guess. I don't know about the 90s, but because it was a completed death, she's no longer
a harm or whatever.
A harm or quote unquote risk. Yeah, right. Because she's not here. So, and there was no reason to believe my stepdad was not capable of taking care of us, you know?
Yeah.
So as far as I know, no, she was not.
Okay.
Or CPS was not.
Yeah. What do you think drove you to do CPS? Like, did you feel connected to your younger brother? Did you feel like, what do you think was in there for you?
I love that as a therapist because I've like psychoanalyzed it myself, right? To be like, that's really interesting. Like, why was that? When I was writing, let's just call it a personal statement. I don't know what it's called, but for my application to do that grant specifically, because it was, you know, it's related to like the foster care system and stuff. I explained that obviously this is not the same. I went from moving from one house to another house with people that knew me, loved me, my biological dad, like, but that transition still of like leaving these siblings and going here, it was like a snippet of what I could imagine. And I felt a lot of empathy for that. But I also think having lost my mom in such a horrific way, and like even just like my curiosity with my brother's experience and what that was like that day for him, hearing the hard stuff was like, not that it was easy for me. I think I just did a good job compartmentalizing to handle things like that, which is like trauma, right? But it's like a quote unquote side effect that I'm like has really benefited me in ways. So hearing that horrific story when CPS came in to talk was like, people don't want to do this. And if I want to, I should do something with that. And I really feel like I had that ability to still be human and empathize with people while they're telling me these awful things. At the time, I still now I'm like, oh, wow, that was a lot of trauma to hear every day. But again, like through supervision and therapy and things, you like process that stuff. But it really, I think, takes a certain kind of person to be able to like hear that regularly and manage it. And again, I think for most people, I don't know how it's sustainable. Like in order for me to have continued to be a good worker in the sense of like getting my stuff done on time and being human and showing up and empathizing for people, it was like, I can only do this for so long. And I knew when I needed to like step away, because I don't think I could have continued to be that person.
Do you think part of it's the system that it's built in is?
Like, I think it's both, because like that, you know, even just like silly stuff like the timelines are like insane. Obviously there's like, it's specifically California. It's really interesting. When you have to remove, which for people listening is like 2% of the time. Okay. It's like very rare. When you do have to remove kids, you remove off a set of penal codes that don't align with codes. They're called WIC codes that you like actually file in court for. And sometimes they don't align well. So it's just like very interesting in the sense of like how the law works behind it. But for me, it was like before having kids, like doing that work, like, I mean, I lived and breathed that job, but I'm so grateful for it. I think it just requires that. Like, I had my son when I worked there. He was 18 months when I left. And when he was a baby, I was like, so when you do a removal, you have basically 48 hours before you're like in court, like addressing it. And there's so much information that you have to like have typed up in your court report. And then you're still trying to like make phone calls and do all these things. It is literally the craziest time doing that. And I was in the middle of like trying to get this court report done. I was commuting to San Diego. I live north of San Diego, like at least an hour and a half commute both ways. And I don't know if I was nursing him or if I was just holding him, but in trying to do my report, but I fell asleep with my laptop on and he rolled off the bed.
Aww.
And that was my like, this is not sustainable. I can't keep doing this. So again, like such an important job. I have so much respect for people that do it because it's so hard and people get like so much shit for that job too. But it's like, if they only knew, if you only knew what was going on, you know?
I do find, I mean, I don't know if it's like the trend, but it's similar for me, like entering into motherhood. I was like, oh, I can't do this intense. I was working at a eating disorder, like inpatient. And I was like, I can't hold this for someone else anymore at this level because I'm entering into this really soft, scary law. There was loss, there was, you know, and a baby, like it was just too much to handle. And CPS is like a hell of a lot different than inpatient.
It was wild. I mean, it was so very, very hard and very different. And honestly, if I'm being honest and transparent, I think what's hard is that I almost, if I didn't, like, my family was going to hurt more than my job. I was not willing to like to lessen my quality of work. And it was almost like my son would have gotten the short end of the stick, and that's not fair. And I realized like because I can't let this go, right? How do you let such a serious job? I have to meet these deadlines and these things, and I have to show up a certain way, because if you don't, what's happening to these families and these kids? But also my son deserved more of me. So I worked my ass off to like literally do another internship while I was working a 4-10 schedule, a new mom. So it was a really like hustle and grind kind of year to get out. So I got my credential, I got licensed during that time.
Wow.
And then found the balance. So like as hard as it was, I really say like that, had that not been that difficult, it would not have pushed me to go school social work and like kind of take that next level, you know, and then now look where I'm at, like being able to like make these transitions but it all has just evolved as it, like you said, it continues to do.
Yeah. It's almost, I'm wondering, because I think this is what feels true for me. And I wonder if it's true for you. It's like this, you know, before you become a mother, I'm going to help and but help all these people, help heal.
Yeah.
And then you become a mother and you realize, oh, I need more healing still. And my child needs me.
Yeah.
And so it's like this shift of energy in some way of like, I am still externally healing, but now it's drawing me more internally and in my family to focus on that, which is way harder.
Oh my God. Yeah. If I could just continue to like help other people, then I don't have to help myself. Right.
Exactly.
But no, motherhood, I always say like totally brings out the parts of you that still need work.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
How do you think your experience with your mom has shaped you as a mom?
Oh gosh. I mean, in like the tough ways, I feel like my nervous system, right, is just like shot. I feel like I'm easily agitated and I like to just like keep that real. I can be really reactive, right? Like, and I don't know, I don't have anything to compare to. So I'm like, would I have been that way anyways? Who knows? But of the spicy things I hear about my mom, I'm like, this is like on brand. She was a little spicy, sweet? I hear.
Yeah.
But truly, I think the biggest thing and like that I hope my kids see one day is I'm very, well, two things, and I'll speak from what I hear outside of me, from people that love and know me as like a mom and see my kids, is that I'm very patient and I'm very intentional. And I feel so grateful because I don't always feel the most patient. I do feel intentional, but I'm constantly like, I know, 1, I want to work. 2, I need to work. And 3, working truly makes me a better mom. Like I'm very like, you know, kind of structured with my time of like this time to this time I'm working. This time is my like mom time. And like, I don't like to sacrifice that time, but I just want to make my kids' childhood like magical in ways that like I remember my mom doing. And something that I'm very grateful for that I don't think my mom necessarily did, but I think after her dying, I'm very influenced by, is we had a ton of home videos. We had a lot of pictures, which is so great considering the time frame that she died. And like she had like a couple baby books, but I am like nostalgia corner over here. Like I have journals for my kids, letters, I save all kinds of things. So I have like pictures I print out every year for them. I make an annual yearbook. Like I want them to be able to look back at their childhood and like see all of it. So that is probably like the biggest thing. And it drives them crazy right now because they're like, I don't want to take a picture. And I'm like, too bad you're taking a picture. Do you want to be in the yearbook? You know?
Yeah.
But it really is like, I just like to capture all of that, which is a balance of being present and also like wanting to get the moment, you know? But it's, I just think I just want, it is such an unconditional love. And, you know, one thing that I like to do with them, I don't know if it's so much influenced by my mom, but when I do fuck up, because I do fuck up, I like to make sure to apologize and like talk to them. And I just always want to be like that safe home base. So while none of my parents are perfect, there are certain things that all of them have done that I'm like, oh, I want to make sure I bring that into like my relationship with my kids. Because I mean, truly outside of losing my mom in this horrific way, I had a great childhood, and there's so many resiliency factors, and that's all because of all my parents and all of the work that they did, you know, and how they all showed up.
Yeah. The tribe.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that yearbook. It's also like, you know, healing yourself too. And like, you're going to know who I was as a mom and you're going to know who you were.
Yes.
And that's like so special.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's my hope. I know they don't appreciate it so much yet, but they will.
And they're both boys, right?
They're both boys. Yep.
How old are they?
4 and 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have 4 and 6.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah, you're right there.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's a lot of fun.
But they do, like, even, like, I make, little videos and stuff, like, we'll lay in bed and they're like, can I see that video? Like, or can I see my baby video? And we go back and watch their, like, birth video from the hospital. And it's just so sweet. So I think I'm harder on myself most of the time, but I think we all are as moms, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's always an interesting thing. So I'm like, who would I be had that not happened? And obviously I'll never know, but I like to think that losing her has influenced me in truly more positive ways. And, trying to channel more of that, because what's the alternative? Like, I don't.
Yeah. How would you describe your mom's personality in the way that you remember her?
It's funny. I think my vision, how I view her, is so mixed with like what other things I know about her. Because I do wonder sometimes, I'm like, how much do I know about her from my experience? How much is like videos or stories I've created or like hearing other people? But I really see her in this very like kind of whole human way. I think the part I get like the most sad about is like not getting to have an adult relationship with her. Like, I love all those relationships with my parents now where, I can cuss, I can be myself, I learn about their life. I see them as like the whole human, we all talk shit about things we did. And my mom had a lot of like journals and letters and things that I've had access to since she died. And I've kind of learned, I think she like really struggled. Like, I see her as like somebody that really struggled with her mental health, that experienced a lot of horrific things. And I think the part that makes me sad is like, had she been given more of an opportunity and more resources about like how to like navigate that. Like, when I think of like trauma work today and how different is that compared to 1999.
Yeah.
But I think I really see her as that, and as someone that like did her best and someone that loved her kids. And she is truly, when I talk about suicide, like, I shouldn't say never, maybe like 98% of me truly believes like she felt like a burden. She felt like we were better off without her. Like, and 2% is like, what the fuck, Mom? Like, how did you believe that? Right.
Yeah.
But I really see her as that. Like, I have a lot of love for her. And I actually saw like a medium.
Yes. Tell me everything.
Yes. For the first time, maybe like about a year ago, I had a friend who's had an unfortunate amount of loss in her life and swears by this woman and had been going to her for like 10 years. And I've always kind of put it off. One, because first of all, I'm not really religious anymore, but I grew up very Christian. And it was like, I don't know. I think there's some embedded piece of like, if I do this, am I going to hell?
Yeah.
But also my biggest fear was like, what if I do this and she doesn't come through?
Yeah.
Like, what is that? I would rather like not know if she would or not than like show up and be like hopeful that she would and she doesn't.
Yeah.
So last year, I think I finally, after leaving my school job, starting this, I felt like in a place of like not survival anymore, that I'm like, okay, let me try this out. And long story short, there's a level of skepticism. And I'm like, say this woman listened to any podcast I've been on, looked me up on social media, she would know a lot about me in a way of like my mom and how she died and all these things. If you remove any of that, it's absolutely wild what she was saying. Yeah. And I asked her, she's like, I don't look any of that up. So I'm like, okay, if I really believe that, then it's absolutely wild. But there were pieces when I told her I was skeptical that she said that, like, there's no way. So when I said, I'm feeling skeptical, like, how do I know? And she's like, let me see if I can get your mom to like share anything. So we're just on the phone, right? And she's like, okay, like, your mom's showing me blonde. Do you have blonde hair? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, okay. She said, your mom said that you dyed your hair brown once and that she didn't like it. And I was cracking up because I've dyed my hair brown technically twice, but it's not on Instagram. It's not on Facebook. This is like MySpace days. It doesn't exist online, that you cannot see.
Yeah.
And it's something that my dad and stepmom have told me, like, when I did dye it, like, and I was like, that's, as silly as that sounds, like, wild.
Oh my gosh.
But that all said, if it's true that she came through and this is like really her, there was just so much like apologizing for like the impact, like regretting her decision, but like also being in a place of peace. And there was someone in her life that abused her in some awful ways that has also died, and who I will never forgive. But like, she talked about like seeing him where she's at, and like they're okay, she's forgiven him. And she gave me a lot of really like sweet messages towards my older brother.
Aww.
And like even that almost felt like more healing, because for the most part I feel pretty adjusted in this. And like hearing that, I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to like share this with him. It was a really like good experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Was her abuser alive when she died by suicide?
Yeah. Yep.
And then when did he die?
In the last like 10-ish years, I think.
Okay. Like by natural causes?
I don't even know. I hope it wasn't natural. He was awful. He abused a lot of people.
Yeah. Was it in the family or outside the family?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, my paternal grandfather or maternal grandfather. So her dad.
Her dad. Okay.
Who I never met him or anything.
Oh, so your mom kept you away from him?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
Did he live far away?
Far away in Alaska.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were her parents divorced, or they were still married?
Her parents were divorced. Yeah. A lot of domestic violence, lots of different kinds of abuse. My mom's mom, who I'm really close with, have a good relationship with. I actually sat down and like interviewed her a couple years ago.
Wow.
And like got to hear like her story and her side of things, and really, really beautiful just to like have that kind of connection. But yeah, he's not a good person.
Yeah. What was her reaction to your mom's death? Her mom. Do you remember?
First of all, my grandma is like, she's so funny. I call her like a sweet little gangster. She really only likes her grandkids. Like she's kind of like,
okay. Yeah.
You know, but she's lived a really hard life. She actually has lost a ton of people in her immediate family, siblings, her parents, many people in her family to suicide.
Wow.
So this was like at it, but honestly, it's just, she's lived a really hard, sad life. So I just try to like shower her with so much love, but it was hard for her. She has a hard time talking about it. I mean, she has 2 daughters, and she was really close with my mom. Like, my other aunt lived in Alaska at the time as well. And my mom and my grandma lived like, you know, nearby. My grandma was around a lot as a kid, and they had a good relationship. So it was really hard for her.
Yeah. And her sister, your mom's sister, is alive?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In Alaska.
She now lives in Washington, where my grandma lives. So my grandma moved to Washington a couple years ago.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think your mom would tell you about who you are as a mom if she came back right now, or just as a person?
You know, it's so funny because in my mind, when I picture her, right, I'm technically older than her, which is so weird. Like, I outlived her a few years ago.
Yeah.
But I still picture her like in these pictures and like have this kind of version of her. But I just think she'd be like proud. Like, I think that she would like love on my kids so much. And my kids know who Grandma Kathleen is. Like I keep her alive in so many ways. And when I'm feeling sad, I'm like, yeah, I'm just feeling sad. I miss my mom, you know, and my kids are so sweet about it. But yeah, I just picture, as weird as it sounds, like a very normal, just like mundane, but in like a very positive way. Like, you know,
like you're doing
seeing
great.
her for dinners, hanging out. I imagine her like, I more so picture like what would it have been like for her to like love on my babies when they were babies. And, yeah.
And so as your work in private practice, doing suicide is not a bad word. What have you decided, or you've been deciding that, but how has this impacted your work, and what are you offering out of that?
Yeah. So when I would say when I worked for CPS and even in school social work, obviously like came across suicide a lot. CPS, when I would come across it, my role looked a little different, right? It was like, how do I make sure the kids are safe and like addressing this and getting them resources and support, but I wasn't in a therapist role. School social work, I was touched by it all the time. Like there's not a week that goes by that I wasn't talking about it, and honestly, probably like daily. But that is where I think I got really interested in like suicide prevention in a way. Well, first of all, I was like an advisor for like a little teen suicide awareness and prevention, like let's call it a club, and got to like help high school students be like little mental health advocates for others.
Aw.
So we did like little campaigns and like cute things. It was like this county ran kind of collaboration with us. But obviously like had this big passion in it. And what I realized, especially in working with like some of the school counselors, is just how uncomfortable people can feel in doing these types of assessments. And for me, because I intellectualized it so much, I like wanted to learn everything about how to do these in the best way. And also, there's a lot of things I will tell you I'm not good at, but one thing I'm really good at is building relationships. And so how important that aspect is in doing these assessments, even if it's I just met you. How can we establish some sense of a relationship and rapport, even if it's just for a couple hours that I'm sitting with you to make you feel comfortable while I ask these really hard, intrusive questions?
Yeah.
So that's where I think a lot of the passion started stemming from. And then pretty much from the get-go, we had to like sign up for like trainings that we did for parents and the community across the district. And so I was always like, I'll take September for suicide prevention.
Oh.
And then that kind of expanded where then I was asked to help train the other social workers and counselors and school psychs in the district.
Wow.
And then it just kind of kept expanding. And then once I went into private practice, I'm fully virtual. I also don't feel comfortable taking on high-risk clients that are struggling with suicidality in like a once-a-week virtual place, right? Of course, if I have a client that comes up for them after we've been working together, of course, we like face it, but it's not somebody that I'm like actively taking on. But I still want to like have my hands in it in some way. So now I think it's just kind of naturally shifted to like, how can I help educate other people who are doing this work still? And even just like I went recently to a school, and while only like one or two of them are the people to actually probably conduct the assessment, it was still like we all kind of have a part in this as a system.
Absolutely.
And so helping to just educate people about it in a way that's not dry and boring. Like, that's my biggest thing is like already suicide is probably not super fun to sit in. So like, can I bring some spunk and like personality into talking about something that one, nobody really wants to talk about or listen to.
Yeah.
Let's be real. And two, and something that is important. And that's almost like, oh, I don't need to know it until you do. And when you do need to know. Because there's a lot of ways that we can go wrong in this. And so how can we like show up and do no harm in the process?
And do you talk about your story a lot in those teachings? Or
yeah, I wouldn't say like a lot. But I do talk about, like, I always start with, like, my why. Like, why do I do this work? And I tie pieces into it, like, the training. And it's usually just, like, riffing off of what feels good or what I want to share. But I started sharing a little bit more about who she is as a person in this last training I did. Because my big thing is, like, I don't want people that have died by suicide to only be known for how they died.
Yeah.
So I was like wanting to share more about like her life and who she was as a mom, and you know, this is a picture of us at a Beach Boys concert, and kind of I guess like giving some credit to who she was,
humanize
rather than just how she died. Yeah, very humanizing. Yeah.
What was it like working at a school with for teens and suicide? Was that stressful? Did you see numbers increase? Were there a lot of people that completed it? What was that like?
So one, I think anything compared to CPS is like nothing. So I went in with that. Again, hard in different ways, but even like on a crisis, I was still usually out of work by like 6 p.m., which was like my normal off time over there. Yeah, I think it was definitely something that came up a lot. I can't really talk too much about like how many completed.
But legally, you can't say that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Because usually, like, when that does happen, it's not, like, open about unless the family, like, acknowledges it.
Okay.
But it didn't happen very often at all across the district. Lots of assessments. So, for sure, a lot of conversations around it and, like, asking those questions, getting people support. But I really am proud of watching the district evolve over the time frame that like, because when I came in, they really didn't have school social workers. We were like the first chunk that they hired. They had one for a few years, but hired like a chunk of us at one time. There was, from what I heard, like times people were getting placed on holds for like cutting, like a 5150 mental health hold. Yeah, like going to the hospital, or at least that was like people would hear even cutting, and it was like that's where people's minds went. So a lot of psychoeducation around yeah, like what do we do when someone is self-harming? Does that automatically mean they're suicidal or at risk for suicide? So it was cool to watch like the evolution of what the district did and how they responded to things, and also how much we started talking about it. Like, and that was really amazing. So overall, I mean, it was a really positive experience. And I think like just getting to be that person for kids was so cool that like people did feel comfortable coming in, but it was hard. Like,
yeah,
you know, there's plenty of days that, because to me, if I'm gonna, and this is just my own, like if I'm doing a threat assessment and like you do have to go on a hold, or like you voluntarily want to go to the hospital, it's a process, or like whatever that looks like that day, like, okay, everything else is getting saved. Like all these other kids I need to see, we're gonna see them another day this week. And I'm gonna sit with you. So I'm gonna stay with you until all of that happens. So sometimes that was sitting with the kid until 7, 8 o'clock at night, you know, at the school. But to me, that's the stuff that I hope that kid can look back on later and be like, you know, I don't remember her name, but I remember her caring. I remember her giving me snacks and like sitting with me until that really hard moment, or like
I wasn't alone.
Making it less traumatic than it already probably is for them.
Yeah. And do you think that's like the answer in a lot of ways, like connection and building relationships?
Oh, I think relationships is like huge.
Yeah.
When you look at, not to get all like theoretical, but Thomas Joyner is I think he's a psychologist in the field who's lost his dad to suicide and has pretty much spent his whole career understanding and teaching people about suicide. And he has a theory that's basically like, in order for somebody to die by suicide, they need desire to die by suicide and like essentially a level of fearlessness. And he breaks down desire, so that first component, as like experiencing thwarted belonging, and then like burdensomeness. So feeling like you're a burden and feeling like you don't belong. So right away, to me, like when I start thinking about like the antidotes to that, right? Or like building up things to help prevent suicide, it's making sure people belong and helping people to feel like they're not a burden. And while all day long we know that we can be doing those things and someone could still have that perception that they are, I think there's things that we can do that are relationship building to help people feel like they do belong, even if we don't always get it right. So that is like huge for me. You know? And I think that that's where a lot of the prevention comes to play. So even when I was doing these assessments, I may not have even had a relationship with these kids, but they sure as hell had a relationship with their PE teacher to tell them what was going on for them to get them in my door.
Right.
And that was really cool.
Yes. And teens, I remember that I like disappointed my grandma one day, and I was like, I'm out. That's it for me, you know? And just that feeling of like, I'm a burden.
Yes.
You shouldn't be here. You fucked up, you know?
Yes.
And so, and those are in teen emotions and hormones, like everything is so big. Yeah.
It's so interesting because so many parents understand that piece, but don't understand like the capability that kids have around these things, like, or believing like, oh, it can't be that bad. And I'm like, I get it. Like seeing their high school breakup may not seem that big, but I don't know. Do you have this experience? My high school heartbreak was like the most gut wrenching, like awful feeling.
Yes.
So for whatever reason you want to call it, like, and it is an interesting aspect because I don't think I truly have ever felt like I don't want to be here anymore. I've had like pings, especially like postpartum when you're sleep deprived and your hormones are out of whack, of like, what would it be like if I wasn't here? Like, or sometimes feeling that sense of feeling like a burden, but I really cannot even begin to fathom what somebody must feel like to feel that every day and a constant. And then the unfortunate aspect of like engaging in behaviors or living in a way that unfortunately begins to like confirm that, right? So friends invite you out and you don't go out, and then you tell yourself they don't want to spend time with you, and then they stop inviting you out because you never come.
Yeah.
And then you're like, see, they don't want to spend time with me.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's one of the first things that when I meet with like a new client, what I go over, like, you know, have you ever felt suicidal, and kind of explain that. I always say like, this may never come up for you, but I'm going to give you like a 2-minute spiel that like, just because you haven't doesn't mean you may never. And if you do, I want you to understand how I see it, how I think of it, so that you know I can be a safe place for you. And also like, I kind of talk about like the scale of suicidality. and like what even passive suicidal ideation looks like, what those kind of like more intrusive thoughts or passive thoughts might sound like. And I'm like, this is like the sweet spot to tell me, because then we can really work on it. I'm not even worried about your safety necessarily because of where you're at, and just really encouraging people to know it's okay to talk through this, because people's biggest fear, especially the high school students, it was like, if I say this, I'm going on a groupie sock vacation, right? I'm automatically going to the hospital.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is like, if that's not what you want, if this is like not a voluntarily I want to go there, that is like
That's great.
worst case, last case scenario. There's all these things that we can hopefully do before then, but we got to know what's going on before it gets to that point for you.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that.
Yeah.
And just thank you for the education that you're doing.
Yeah.
Like in schools, on here, but in the world, like just really appreciate. Yes. And I think really breaking it down to a spectrum and again, humanizing all of those thoughts and feelings that we all have and where we're connected and where we're disconnected and how far we can go down that scale.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Elyce, yay. Okay. Tell people where they can find you. Are you taking clients? You also have a clothing brand.
Thanks.
Tell us all the things.
I like how you got in closer to the mic for that.
Yes.
So yes, you can find me on Instagram. It's probably the best way. And that's at the Therapy Co with an _. And then I am in California. I feel like I'm always possibly taking clients. You know, there's always like ebbs and flows. So I'm like, reach out. You can find my therapy website is thetherapyco.org. And then, as Jen mentioned, I do have some empathy merch. So I have sweatshirts and beanies and things that you can find on thetherapyco.shop.
Love it. And if you're a business or a school and you want Elyce to come talk, reach out.
Bring me on.
Yeah.
I'll be there. No problem.
Okay, Elyce, thank you so much for your time and
Thanks,
your heart.
Girl.
Appreciate
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
We need like 4 more hours.
I know. Part 2 coming.
Dun, dun, dun.
Thanks for listening to our show. If you're a mental health professional and want to feel more confident around the subject of suicide, check out Elyce's new training in our show notes. Suicide is not a bad word. As always, I appreciate your open ears, minds, and hearts, and we'll see you next time.